My ex-husband, Donald, walked out on me 26 years ago when I confronted him about his 3-year-long affair with a younger woman in his workplace. Donald was a classic narcissist, always refusing to admit his own mistakes and constantly finding ways to gaslight me during our arguments. He would repeatedly tell me throughout our marriage that I was insufficient as a wife or that I wasn't satisfying him enough. His manipulative tactics were so relentless that it had started to make me question my own self-worth and sanity. When I finally gathered enough courage and evidence to confront him about the affair, I knew he would still not relent. However, I had screenshots of his text messages with the woman, so I thought maybe he would finally see the error in his ways. The proof was undeniable, yet Donald refused to acknowledge it. Instead, he accused me of being delusional and insisted that I was invading his privacy by going through his messages. He maintained that he and the woman were just friends, despite the clear evidence to the contrary. The arguments became exhausting. No matter how much proof I presented or how logical my points were, he continued to deny everything and turn the blame back on me. He made me feel like I was losing my mind. Eventually, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't tolerate his lies and manipulations any longer. In a moment of clarity and self-respect, I told him to leave since he refused to admit his mistakes or take any responsibility for his actions. Since I was paying for the bills around the house and my name was also on the mortgage, I wanted him gone and informed him that we would sort out our assets during our divorce. Hearing the word divorce, Donald immediately snapped. His demeanor changed in an instant, and he started getting violent. He yelled that he was not going to allow me to divorce him and that he would continue doing whatever he wanted with other women. He insisted that as his wife, I needed to keep my mouth shut and live with it. His eyes were wide as saucers as he then leaned near to my face and threatened to take my son away from me if I didn't comply with his demands. The fear and intimidation he was using were overwhelming, and I could feel my hands and legs starting to shake. I knew that I had to leave immediately, right then and there, for the sake of my safety and my son's. Otherwise he looked like he could even start to physically assault me just to get me to agree with him. I quickly grabbed my purse and car keys and told my son to get in the car with me so we could get away from my ex-husband, at least until he could calm down. Donald, however, refused to let us go. He forced himself into the car with us, yelling and making threats, saying he was going to end me for trying to leave him. The situation was terrifying, but I knew I had to remain calm and find a way to get us to safety. I started the car and told Donald that if he didn't leave me alone, I was going to drive him to the police station. However, Donald just laughed at me and said he wouldn't allow me to do that. He threatened to swerve the car and even brought his hands near mine as I was driving, showing how he would ram my hands to prevent me from driving if I tried to head toward the police station. As we reached a traffic light and stopped, I saw an opportunity. I got out of the car in the middle of the road and screamed for help, telling everyone around me that my life and my son's life were in danger and that my husband was threatening to kill us. Thankfully, a woman driving behind us had noticed that something wasn't right and immediately called the police without hesitation. Donald tried to get out of the car and run away, but the people who had been watching the whole commotion stopped him and took him down. I am still so grateful to all the onlookers who saved me and my son that day. Their quick actions and willingness to help made all the difference in that terrifying moment. When Donald was finally arrested and taken into custody, a wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt safe, both for myself and my son, Harry. The ordeal had left Harry terrified, almost on the verge of a panic attack. Seeing the fear in his eyes broke my heart, but I managed to calm him down. I held him close and promised him that I would never let him go through such a situation again. I assured him that I would do everything in my power to make sure Donald would never trouble us again. However, when Donald's family found out about his arrest, they called me, not to offer support or to understand what had happened, but to shame me. They blamed me for trying to get my husband arrested and accused me of being the cause of Donald's mental state. They said as their deal I should take my statement from the police and free my ex-husband since this was all my fault anyway. Their words were harsh and accusatory, and for a moment, I felt the weight of their judgment. But I had already reached my breaking point. I had endured enough from Donald and his family over the years. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent, so I snapped. I told them that their son needed to learn a lesson that they had failed to teach him, to respect women and children. I told them to wait and watch as I would use every legal means available to make sure Donald faced the consequences of his actions and that I would take everything away from their son. I expressed my shame and regret for having kept my mouth shut for so long, allowing myself and Harry to suffer in his hands because I was too scared to leave. I let them know that I was done being silent and passive. Despite their attempts to intimidate me, I stood my ground. I made it clear that I wasn't backing down, not this time. The fear and intimidation that had kept me in check for years were gone. I was determined to protect myself and my son and to ensure that Donald would never have the power to harm us again. Their attempts to scare me only strengthened my resolve. I was ready to fight, not just for justice, but for our freedom and peace of mind. Long story short, not only was Donald forced to be admitted into a psychiatric center for his violent rage, but he was also sentenced to be under close monitoring for 8 months. He also had to go to mandatory anger management classes. The court recognized the extent of his abuse and infidelity, which played a significant role in the divorce proceedings. As a result, I was awarded more than half of his assets because of his years of cheating and abuse, which provided a sense of justice and security for me and Harry. Additionally, Donald was ordered to pay child support for our son until Harry turned 18, ensuring that we had the financial stability we needed. I also took out a restraining order against my ex-husband, making sure that he could never approach me or Harry again in the future. This legal protection was crucial for our peace of mind, knowing that he couldn't come near us and cause any more harm. Throughout the divorce proceedings, Donald tried to catch my eye, hoping to intimidate or manipulate me as he had done so many times before. But I had reached a point of no return. I acted as if he didn't even exist, maintaining my composure and focusing on what mattered, securing a safe and stable future for myself and Harry. When our divorce was finalized, I made the decision to move out of town and into a new place, far, far away from Donald and his family. I wanted to ensure they could never trouble us again. This move symbolized a new start for me and my son, a chance to rebuild our lives away from the shadows of our past. Even with all the money I had won from the divorce, starting a new life from scratch was still a struggle. But I never backed down as I was determined to provide a safe and stable environment for Harry. I found a job at a library, a place that resonated deeply with me as I've always loved reading books. Working at the library allowed me to immerse myself in a world of stories and knowledge, and I took great joy in helping people find the right books to read. This job wasn't just a means to support us financially, it was also a source of personal fulfillment and healing. Being surrounded by books and helping others discover the joy of reading brought a sense of normalcy and peace to my life after what I had been through. Being a single mother can be incredibly challenging, especially when your son grows up and starts questioning you about your past, particularly about your ex-husband. When Harry reached his teenage years, he began to ask more questions about Donald, and I knew it was time to have an honest conversation with him. We sat down together, and I carefully explained why I had left Donald. Harry had fragmented memories of our past, but he didn't know the full story. To ensure he understood the gravity of the situation, I showed him court documents as proof of the abuse we had endured. I wanted him to know the truth, not just to understand what had happened, but also to ensure he never grew up to repeat his father's mistakes. I explained to Harry the legal repercussions his father had faced and how the laws have become even stricter now. It was important for me that he understood the severity of abuse and the importance of respecting others, especially women and children. This conversation was difficult, but it was necessary. I wanted Harry to grow up with a clear understanding of right and wrong, shaped not by the mistakes of his father but by the lessons we learned from our past. Through this, I hope to instill in him the values of empathy, respect, and integrity, ensuring he would never inflict the kind of pain we had suffered on anyone else. Throughout the 26 years of raising Harry alone, I have given my son everything he has ever wanted. He has grown up to be a fine young man and is nothing like Donald. Harry continues to live with me even today. I don't mind having my son live with me since this is as much his house as it is mine. 3 years ago, his girlfriend, Claire, who he eventually married, moved in with us. Harry and Claire were in love and wanted to live together, so I allowed them to move into the basement and renovate it as they pleased. The basement even has a separate entrance, allowing them to come and go as they wish, which gives them their own privacy. The only shared spaces are the kitchen and dining area, where the three of us sometimes sit together and have dinner. These are the only spaces that provide me with some time to interact with them and check in on how they're doing. I've always given the young couple as much space as I could, respecting their need for independence. However, I think it's important for me to mention here that Claire has never warmed up to me much. Now, I know most people complain about their mother-in-laws on Reddit, but I swear I have never done anything to disrespect or offend Claire in all the years I have known her. I understand firsthand how it feels to be intimidated, hence I would never want to make another woman feel that way. When Claire first moved into my house, I wanted her to feel as comfortable as possible with Harry and encouraged her to change things around the house as she pleased. Unlike Harry, who grew up with loving parents, Claire has had a very difficult childhood. She has shared heartbreaking stories with us about how her stepfather would burn her with cigarette marks, and how her mother would let her starve by leaving her hungry while she would be off drunk in a bar. Hearing her stories has always filled me with sympathy for the poor child, and naturally, I have developed a soft spot for her. I've always treated Claire like my own daughter, wanting to provide her with the care and support she never received growing up. Initially, everything seemed fine between the three of us. However, over time, Claire started to feel uneasy around me. For some reason, she began to think that Harry and I were just too close with each other since she never had a healthy parent-child relationship. This perception puzzled me because I had always tried to give them space and respect their privacy. She would tell Harry that it was weird for him as an adult to spend so much time with me. Just to clarify, my son and I watch a show together every Saturday, which Claire even started watching with us as well. It's just a 1-hour show every Saturday, and my son and I liked watching it. I don't see how watching a show together could be seen as weird, but that's what she started telling Harry. When Harry talked to me about it, he explained that he needed to listen to his girlfriend, and I completely understood. I wanted my son to prioritize his partner, so I never questioned him or Claire about their feelings. However, Claire continued to have issues with me further. She would subtly discourage or criticize our family traditions or activities that involved me and Harry. For instance, as a single mother, I always made it a point to spend every Christmas with my son, creating a homemade advent calendar each year filled with activities we could enjoy together like crafts, ice skating, drinking hot chocolate, or seeing the local Christmas lights. Harry has always cherished this tradition and would even tell me how he wanted his children to experience this. However, when Claire came into the picture and spent the first Christmas with us, she started complaining about how boring these activities were and expressed a preference to spend Christmas partying with her friends instead. She told Harry that he was too old to be spending Christmas with his mommy and that they should go out like other young couples. Despite my sincere efforts to include her in our family traditions and activities, Claire consistently tried to alienate me and diminish the special moments I shared with Harry. It was hurtful, but I remained committed to maintaining a positive environment for Harry and respecting his relationship with Claire, even if it meant adapting and accommodating her preferences. On top of all this, Claire used to have a bad habit of walking around in inappropriate clothing when she first moved in. There have been instances where I've seen her cooking in our kitchen wearing only lingerie in the middle of the day, or sometimes just wearing a towel that barely covered her ass, even while eating dinner with me. As a woman, I have no issue with nudity or what people do in their own private spaces, but I prefer not to see that in our shared spaces. It's about respecting people and considering whether others would be comfortable with this level of nudity or not. When I brought this up with Harry and asked him to talk to Claire about wearing more appropriate clothes, it sparked a heated argument. Claire reacted defensively, accusing Harry and me of trying to control her and asserting that it was her body and her choice on how she dressed. I calmly explained that I was uncomfortable with her exposing herself in front of me, but Claire retaliated by calling me a pervert. That really angered me, so I bluntly told her that if she wanted to walk around naked, she could do so on the streets, but inside our home, in our shared spaces, she needed to show respect and be civil. I made it clear that if she couldn't abide by that, she couldn't continue living with us. This immediately silenced Claire, as she realized she didn't have any other place to go. Since then, she started to dress more appropriately around me. When Harry told me that he had proposed to Claire, I was genuinely happy for my son, though I did have concerns that their relationship might be moving too quickly. However, I knew it wasn't my place to interfere, so I kept my thoughts to myself. I ended up paying for all their wedding expenses since Claire's parents didn't seem to care about her and didn't even bother attending their wedding. Despite covering everything, Claire began pressuring Harry to ask me to fund their honeymoon. Harry had saved up some money for a nice trip, but Claire wanted to go overseas, which they couldn't afford without my financial help. I firmly declined their request to give them more money and explained to them that I had already provided them with a lot, including a place to live in my basement rent-free and covering all their wedding costs since Claire wanted a dreamy wedding. I emphasized that if they wanted to travel abroad, they would need to save up and plan for it themselves. It was important for me to set boundaries and encourage them to be responsible for their own financial decisions, even if it meant disappointing Claire. Although Claire was rather pissed with my decisions, she did not argue. I decided this year that it was time for me to retire and fulfill my dream of traveling the world with the money I had saved up. Throughout my life, I had always put my son first, and now I felt it was my turn to explore and see the world while I still could. I shared my plans with Harry and Claire, explaining that I would be renting out my room while I was away to earn some extra income. Harry was supportive and assured me that he would take care of the house during my absence. It was a thrilling prospect to finally have some time for myself after years of focusing on my family. Once I submitted my resignation and began preparing for my travels, I noticed a shift in Harry's attitude toward me. He suddenly started expressing how unfair it was that I had the means to retire and travel while he and Claire were still living in the basement and struggling. He voiced concerns about the challenging economy, expressing doubts about how he would never be able to afford a house on his own, especially since Claire had lost her job and this had added more pressure on his shoulders. My Dill, after being unemployed, had refused to apply to any new jobs as she felt too much anxiety to get back into the workforce. As a result, my son had been borrowing money from me for months to pay for his car loan and other bills since he could not single-handedly pay for them with his income. I understood that he clearly felt trapped in their current living situation. Harry then asked me if he and Claire could instead move into my bedroom while I was gone, suggesting they could rent out their basement to generate income. I understood his frustrations and empathized with his situation as my son. This is why I agreed to let them move into my room and told them that I would move my belongings into storage for the time that I would be away. As long as the basement could be rented out to earn some additional income, I was supportive of this arrangement. Before embarking on my trip next month, I discussed with my lawyers and decided that I would pay off my son's car loan as an additional gesture of thanks for looking after my house while I would be gone. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to support my son and his wife in any way I could. However, before I had the chance to share this news with them, I came home yesterday evening to a surprising sight. My clothes and belongings were strewn on the floor outside my bedroom. At first, I was alarmed and thought our house had been robbed. But when I walked into my room, I found Claire and my son going through my drawers and closet, removing everything. Confused and taken aback, I asked them what was going on. My son explained that since I had given him permission to move into my room, he was helping clear the space for them so they could move their things into the room. I clarified that I hadn't given him permission to start moving my personal belongings and insisted that I wanted to handle the relocation of my things myself. I questioned why they hadn't called me before moving anything and why my belongings were on the floor instead of being packed in boxes. Claire responded that they wanted to empty the room first before packing things into boxes, claiming they were trying to speed up the process since they felt I was taking too long to move out. I felt a mix of frustration and hurt. It was disheartening to see my personal space invaded and my belongings handled without my consent. I had trusted them to respect my possessions in this house while I was gone, yet they were already treating them with so much disrespect, as if my consent no longer mattered. I got increasingly angry and told them to immediately stop going through my things and that I would pack my belongings at my own pace. I made it clear to my son and Claire that they had absolutely no right to enter my bedroom without my permission. Claire argued back defensively, claiming I was overreacting as if they had committed a crime. That infuriated me even more, and I reminded her of how she had barred me from entering the basement since she moved in. She had always insisted on her own privacy, yet here she was dictating what should happen in my own bedroom. Turning to my son, I asked him where he expected me to sleep, as I still had a month left before my trip. Harry tried to calm me down by suggesting I move into the spare bedroom or even into their basement for the remaining days. I was shocked and hurt by his suggestion. I reminded him firmly that this was still my house, to begin with, and they were merely guests living in the basement. They had no right to push me out of my own bedroom or dictate where I should sleep. Hearing this, Claire started yelling at me that I was just an old useless hag who refused to let them have anything and that this was why she had wanted my son to kick me out for years. I was taken aback and turned to Harry in disbelief, asking him if it was true that they wanted to kick me out of my own home. Harry, unable to meet my eyes, looked down in shame. Meanwhile, Claire continued yelling, accusing me of treating them like outsiders and insisting that I had no right to occupy an entire house while they were confined to the basement only. She argued vehemently that since I was retired and planning to travel, I should vacate the house and allow them to take over completely so they could finally start their own family in peace. She said I was only standing in their way and refusing my son his rights to this house. Since this argument, I haven't spoken a word to my son. Harry and Claire have left my belongings alone for the time being, and I have refused to let them move into my bedroom. As I write this, for the first time, I feel a sense of fear and uncertainty. I worry that Harry might be secretly planning ways to push me out of my own home. Legally, I know he can't do that because the house is in my name, but what happens when I'm away traveling for months? It's not just about the physical space, it's about the trust and respect that seems to have been shattered between us. Ida, if I kick out my son and his wife for not respecting my space? Update 1, alright, I've listened to everyone, and I did talk to my lawyer as well. I've given my son and his wife a 2-week notice to move out of the basement. I've been clear with my son that if he doesn't comply, I will cut off the electricity and water to the basement and change all the locks around my house so he cannot come back in. Furthermore, I've warned him that I'm prepared to take him to small claims court to recover all the money he owes me and hasn't repaid. I've also made it clear to my son that their actions towards me could be classified as elder abuse, a serious offense that could lead to legal consequences, including imprisonment. This has understandably left my son feeling terrified, and he's attempted to apologize. However, after everything that's happened, I find it difficult to trust him anymore. As for Claire, she hasn't uttered a word to me or offered any apology for her earlier outburst. I have put up cameras around my home to record just in case they attempt to do anything to me or steal my stuff. Overall, this has been a tough decision to make, but I feel it's a necessary step to reclaim my space. The lack of respect and the strain on our relationship has reached a point where I need to take firm action to protect my own well-being and interests. Update 2, I know everyone has been waiting for an update. Harry and Claire have finally moved out. In the days leading up to their departure, Harry made numerous attempts to negotiate and plead with me. He tried to emotionally manipulate me, expressing how his marriage was at risk because he lacked the financial capacity to support himself and Claire, and urged me to let them stay for a few more months. Despite his pleas, I refused to back down. On the day they were packing their belongings into the car, I could hear Claire hurling insults at me and angrily kicking things around in frustration. Her behavior was hurtful, but I remained composed and refused to react, denying her the satisfaction of seeing me affected. I am also well aware that she took some of my utensils and cutlery from the kitchen while moving out, which angers me, but I have decided to let it go. After they left, I immediately had all the locks in my house changed. I've decided to use the thank you present I had wanted to give my son previously to instead treat myself with some new renovations around the house. I feel so much at peace now that I don't have them living with me. Update 3, it turns out my post has gone viral and my son has discovered it. He and Claire were completely unaware of my intention to give them money as a thank you gift by paying off their car loan, since I never discussed it with them after our fight that day. Now that he's read the post, he's bombarding me with calls, asking me for the gift. He is telling me how much the money can help him and that I should not be so selfish by denying him this. I have told my son that this is all my hard-earned money, and after the way he and his wife have treated me, he has no right to ask me for anything. Meanwhile, Claire, who didn't apologize to me this whole time, has also started to text me, claiming that I owe them this money after everything they've been through because of me. She insists that paying off my son's car loan would help make a significant difference for them financially, and that as his mother, I should do this for them. She has even sent me pictures of the both of them living in a tiny room at a friend's place and blames me for their plight. This entire situation has caught me off guard. While it's true that I had originally planned to help them out of goodwill, their lack of respect towards me ultimately made me decide to not help them out in any way. I feel disappointed by their continued demanding and entitled behavior towards me. It's disheartening that despite my efforts to support and help them, their response hasn't reflected gratitude or understanding of the sacrifices I've made. Obviously, I won't be giving a single penny to my son no matter how much he begs, because I feel like I have done more than enough for them already. I've also made the difficult decision to block my son so he can't disturb me any further. It breaks my heart to take this step, but I know it's necessary for my mental sanity and well-being. I have also postponed my trip for the moment and will be going only after everything is settled and stable.